When 17-year-old Lily Donovan steps into the courtroom, she believes she's fighting for justice, testifying against her stepfather, Martin Graves, a man she is certain has ruined her life. But as the trial unfolds, the case takes a shocking turn. A mysterious woman claims to be Martin's legal wife, unraveling Lily's entire reality. Then, an investigator reveals an even deeper secret: Lily isn't who she thinks she is. Her real name is Lily Alden. For 17 years, she was hidden, erased from existence. But why? And who was behind it? As Lily fights to uncover the truth, she finds herself in a battle not just for justice, but for her very identity. And at the center of it all stands a powerful man, one who won't let her reclaim her past without a fight. This is a story of deception, power, and the search for truth. A trial that was supposed to be about one crime turns into something much bigger. And by the end, Lily will face a choice that changes everything. What really happened all those years ago? And can she survive the forces working to silence her? Stay tuned to find out. If you love gripping courtroom dramas with shocking twists, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. The towering columns of the New York Supreme Court cast long shadows over the crowd gathered outside. Reporters murmured, cameras flashed, and the whispers of bystanders filled the air. Inside the courtroom, Lily sat stiffly in the witness chair, her hands trembling on her lap. "Miss Donovan, please describe what happened on the night of October 3rd, the prosecutor, Eleanor Carter, prompted. Lily swallowed. "I was in my room when he came in. He was angry. I don't remember what he said, but suddenly I was on the floor in pain. When I woke up, I was in the hospital." The courtroom was silent, except for the scribbling of pens and the occasional cough from the audience. Across the room, Martin Graves sat still, his face unreadable. "Your Honor," Martin's attorney, Daniel Hayes, rose to his feet. "I have something that may change this case entirely." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Hayes pressed a button on his laptop, and a video played on the large court screen. The footage was from inside the house, security camera footage. It showed Lily alone in her room. Then, she suddenly collapsed, as if struck by an invisible force. No one was there. The courtroom erupted into murmurs. Lily's heart pounded. "No, that's not right. He was there." "He, Miss Donovan," Hayes interrupted. "Are you certain?" The question sent a chill down her spine. What if she wasn't? Before she could respond, the court doors creaked open. A woman, tall and dressed in black, walked in, holding a briefcase. Her voice rang clear across the courtroom. "My name is Vivian Graves. I am Martin's legal wife." Gasps echoed through the court. Lily turned to her mother, Margaret Donovan, sitting at the prosecution table. But Margaret was frozen, her hands clutching the armrest. The judge banged the gavel. "Order in the court." Vivian's words continued like a knife cutting through the chaos. "Which means his marriage to Margaret was never valid." Lily's mind reeled. If that was true, then what else was a lie? The judge sighed. "We will take a short recess. The court will reconvene in 30 minutes. As Lily stepped down from the witness stand, she felt the weight of the court's judgment pressing on her. Something was deeply wrong with this case. She had no idea that the worst was yet to come. The courtroom doors shut behind Lily as she stepped into the dimly lit hallway. The cold marble floor beneath her feet seemed unsteady. Her mother, Margaret, had barely moved since the revelation. "Mom," Lily whispered, grabbing her arm. "What is she talking about?" "You and Martin were married. You showed me the wedding pictures." Margaret's lips parted, but no words came. Her face was pale, her eyes darting toward the courtroom door as if afraid someone might overhear. Vivian Graves had just shattered everything Lily thought she knew. If she was truly Martin's legal wife, that meant Margaret's marriage was never real. But why had her mother hidden this? More importantly, what else had she been lying about? Before Margaret could respond, Eleanor Carter, the prosecutor, pulled Lily aside. This changes things, Eleanor said, her voice low. If Martin was never legally married to your mother, that complicates the domestic abuse charges. The court might not consider him a legal guardian, which weakens our case. Lily's pulse quickened. But that doesn't change what he did. Eleanor exhaled. It doesn't, but it does change how the court sees you in relation to him. Lily's stomach twisted. This was more than a legal technicality, it was another piece of a puzzle she didn't even know she was trying to solve. From the corner of her eye, she saw Martin standing by the courtroom entrance, his expression unreadable. He wasn't even trying to defend himself. He didn't look afraid. If anything, he looked amused. Lily clenched her fists. He knew something she didn't. 30 minutes passed in a blur. When they re-entered the courtroom, the air was heavier. The judge called the court back into session, and Vivian Graves took the stand. Mrs. Graves, Eleanor began, you claim to be Martin's legal wife. Do you have proof? Vivian slid a manila envelope across the table. Certified marriage documents, she said smoothly. We were married 20 years ago in Nevada. Never divorced. Eleanor scanned the papers. The tension in the courtroom grew with each passing second. Why are you only coming forward now? Eleanor pressed. Vivian folded her hands. Because my husband asked me not to. A murmur spread through the court. Lily's breath caught. Martin had invited her here. Why? Eleanor wasn't backing down. Do you have any knowledge of the allegations against your husband? Vivian tilted her head. I only know that. The truth isn't as simple as it seems. Lily's skin crawled. That wasn't an answer. Eleanor turned back to Lily. Miss Donovan, did you ever know about Mrs. Graves before today? No, Lily said quickly. Not once. My mom never mentioned her. Vivian let out a soft chuckle. Is that so? Lily's spine stiffened. What's that supposed to mean? Vivian glanced at Margaret, whose face was growing redder by the second. Maybe your mother should explain, Vivian said simply. The courtroom fell silent. Margaret finally stood, her voice shaky. I didn't think it mattered. Martin told me she was out of the picture. He said she left years ago. Vivian raised an eyebrow. Did he? Or did you just believe what you wanted to? Margaret's hands trembled. The pieces started clicking into place. Lily turned to her mother, voice rising. Mom, what aren't you telling me? Margaret's gaze dropped. I have to go. Before anyone could stop her, she rushed out of the courtroom. Lily stood frozen, the walls of her world crumbling. Her mother was hiding something, and whatever it was big enough to make her run. The heavy doors of the courtroom slammed shut as Margaret disappeared into the hallway. A stunned silence fell over the room. Lily felt the weight of 100 stares pressing down on her, but her focus was locked on the empty space where her mother had just stood. Your Honor, Eleanor Carter cleared her throat, her voice breaking the silence. I request a short recess. The judge sighed but nodded. The court will reconvene in 20 minutes. The gavel struck. The moment it did, Lily bolted. Margaret didn't get far. Lily found her at the end of the corridor, standing against the marble wall, her breath shaky. Mom! Lily grabbed her arm, forcing her to turn around. What is going on? You're hiding something? Margaret shook her head, eyes filled with something between fear and guilt. Lily not here. Then when? Lily's voice cracked. In there? She gestured back toward the courtroom. Because that's where I just found out my stepfather had a secret wife, and you said nothing. Margaret's hands trembled. I was trying to protect you. Lily let out a bitter laugh. From what? From the truth. Margaret hesitated. And that's when Lily knew this wasn't just about Martin. This was about her. She took a deep breath. Mom, am I even your daughter? Margaret flinched. The air between them thickened. Lily took a step back. Oh my God. 15 minutes later, they were back in the courtroom, but Lily could barely focus. Her mother wouldn't answer her. Wouldn't even deny it. Vivian Graves was still on the witness stand, her piercing gaze landing on Lily like she knew exactly what had just happened. "Mrs. Graves," Eleanor resumed, "aside from your marriage to Mr. Graves, do you have any additional information relevant to this case?" Vivian crossed her legs. "Yes. I know why Martin has been so calm this entire trial." Lily stiffened. The courtroom waited. Vivian glanced at Martin, a small smirk forming on her lips. "Because he knows something neither you nor I do. Something about this case is incomplete." Lily's breath hitched. The judge frowned. "Explain." Vivian turned toward Lily. "Your Honor, I request permission to introduce a new witness." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Vivian reached into her bag, pulled out a sealed envelope, and slid it toward the bailiff. The courtroom watched as the judge opened it. His face tightened. "Who is this person?" Eleanor pressed. The judge set the paper down. "Jack Rowe." Lily's blood ran cold. She had never heard that name before, but Margaret had, because the moment the judge said it, her mother's face went ghost white. Martin, for the first time, actually smiled. Lily's chest tightened. Who was Jack Rowe? And why did her mother look like she had just seen a ghost? The judge sighed. "We will hear testimony from Mr. Rowe. Bailiff, bring him in." The courtroom doors creaked open. A man walked in, tall, gray-haired, with sharp eyes that scanned the room like he had already seen every secret hiding within it. His gaze landed on Margaret. She looked like she wanted to disappear. "Mr. Rowe," the judge said, "do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" Jack Rowe smirked. "That depends, Your Honor." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Depends on what?" Jack turned to Lily. "On whether or not she's ready to hear it." Lily's breath hitched. The truth was coming, and she wasn't sure she was ready. Lily's heartbeat pounded in her ears as Jack Rowe took his place at the witness stand. The courtroom was eerily silent, as if everyone knew they were on the edge of something monumental. Margaret sat stiffly beside Eleanor Carter, her hands clenched together so tightly that her knuckles had gone white. Martin Graves, still unshaken, leaned back in his chair, watching like a spectator at a show he already knew the ending to. The judge sighed. "Mr. Rowe, please state your relationship to this case." Jack crossed his arms. "It's not about my relationship to the case. It's about my relationship to the girl sitting right there." Lily froze. Her fingers dug into the wooden table. "Me?" Jack nodded. "That's right. Because, Lily, I knew your real parents." A cold chill ran down her spine. Margaret inhaled sharply. Jack didn't even look at her. "The truth's coming out one way or another, Margaret. You kept this hidden long enough." Lily's entire body went numb. "Real parents." "Mr. Rowe," Eleanor said, her voice steady but cautious, "please explain what you mean by that." Jack leaned forward. "Lily Donovan is not who she thinks she is. She was taken from her biological parents 17 years ago." The courtroom erupted. Murmurs, gasps, and whispers filled the air. Lily's vision blurred. "Objection." Martin's attorney, Daniel Hayes, shot to his feet. "This is completely irrelevant to the case at hand." The judge banged his gavel. "Overruled. This testimony may affect the credibility of multiple parties in this case." Mr. Rowe, continue. Jack's gaze softened slightly as he looked at Lily. "I was an investigator back then. 17 years ago, I was assigned to a case involving a missing infant. A baby girl. Her parents' real parents were powerful people, and they spent years searching for her." Lily's throat was dry. "Who were they?" Jack hesitated. "Michael and Diana Alden." Lily shook her head. "I don't know those names." "You wouldn't," Jack said grimly, "because you were just a baby when they lost you, and you were raised by someone who wasn't supposed to have you." Lily turned to Margaret, who was trembling now. "Mom, is it true?" Lily's voice cracked. Margaret's lips quivered, but no words came. "Say something." Lily's voice rose, emotion breaking through. Margaret squeezed her eyes shut. Then, in a whisper, she said, "I never meant for you to find out like this." Lily felt the floor shift beneath her. Jack exhaled. "Margaret didn't kidnap you, Lily. But she knew the truth. She raised you knowing you weren't hers. And she kept you away from the people who were looking for you." Lily's breath came in short, shallow gasps. "Why? Why would you do that?" Tears slipped down Margaret's face. "Because I was afraid. Because I loved you and I didn't want to lose you." Lily gripped the edge of the table, nausea rolling over her. She wasn't Margaret's daughter. Her whole life had been a lie. And Martin Graves, he had known. That's why he had been so calm. That's why he hadn't fought back. Because the trial wasn't just about him. It was about something much bigger. Something Lily never saw coming. The judge cleared his throat. "This revelation has serious legal implications. We will take a recess while we determine how to proceed. The court will reconvene in 1 hour." The gavel struck. Lily didn't move. She didn't think she could. Everything she knew had just shattered. And the worst part? This wasn't over yet. Lily sat frozen in her chair long after the gavel struck, the sounds of the courtroom fading into a dull hum. People shuffled out for recess, but she couldn't move. Her hands were clenched together in her lap, her breath shallow. She wasn't who she thought she was. She wasn't Lily Donovan. She was Lily Alden, the daughter of strangers. A chair scraped against the floor beside her. She turned slowly, meeting Jack Rowe's gaze. The investigator studied her carefully, his expression unreadable. "Lily," he said quietly, "I know this is a lot to process, but we don't have much time. There's more you need to know." Lily barely heard him. Her thoughts were a storm raging, chaotic, impossible to control. Margaret was still seated at the prosecution table, her shoulders slumped, her face pale. She looked smaller than Lily had ever seen her. The betrayal hit like a punch to the stomach. "You lied to me," Lily whispered. Margaret flinched. "I wanted to tell you, but you didn't," Lily cut in, voice sharper now. "You let me grow up thinking you were my mother. You let me believe a lie." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "You were happy. I couldn't take that away from you." Lily shook her head, her nails digging into her palms. "You didn't just keep me from them. You kept them from me. My real parents, are they even still alive?" Jack hesitated. "Your father is." The world tilted again. Michael Alden, a man she had never met, a man who had spent years looking for her. "And my mother?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack's jaw tightened. "She died 10 years ago. Cancer." The breath left Lily's lungs. Margaret let out a choked sob beside her, but Lily couldn't bring herself to look. 10 years. Her mother had died 10 years ago. A mother she had never even known existed. The weight of it was suffocating. "Lily," Jack said, his voice steady, "your father is in New York. He's been following this trial." Lily snapped her head toward him. "What?" Jack nodded. "When the case started, your name made headlines. Michael saw it. He suspected, but he wasn't sure. I confirmed it for him last week." Lily's mind spun. Her real father knew. "He's been waiting for you," Jack continued. "And he's ready to see you. But it's your choice." Lily's fingers trembled. A father she had never met. A life she had never known. She felt Margaret's gaze on her, pleading silently. But Lily didn't know how to look at her anymore. "Lily!" Eleanor Carter's voice broke through her thoughts. The prosecutor had returned, standing at the edge of the table. "We need to talk about the case." Lily swallowed hard. The case. Her eyes flickered to Martin Graves, still seated calmly at the defense table. He wasn't watching her. He was watching Margaret. Because this wasn't just about her. This was about why Margaret had kept her hidden. And Martin knew the answer. Lily forced herself to stand, her legs unsteady. "I need to talk to him." Eleanor frowned. "Martin?" Lily nodded. "Alone." Margaret stiffened. Lily, no! Lily turned to her, anger flashing in her eyes. You lost the right to tell me what to do the second you decided to lie to me. Margaret's face crumpled. Jack exchanged a look with Eleanor before sighing. All right. We'll arrange it. Lily's stomach twisted as she glanced toward Martin. He had been silent for too long, and she was going to find out why. The courtroom was nearly empty when Lily walked back in. The echoes of distant conversations faded behind her as the doors shut, sealing her in with the one man who had been calm through it all. Martin Graves sat at the defense table, his hands folded neatly, his posture relaxed. He didn't look like a man on trial. He looked like a man who had already won. Lily stopped a few feet away, crossing her arms. You knew. Martin chuckled softly. You'll have to be more specific, kid. Lily's fingers curled into fists. You knew I wasn't Margaret's daughter. You knew the truth this whole time. Martin leaned back, studying her. Not the whole time, he admitted. But I figured it out long before you did. Lily's stomach twisted. Then why didn't you say anything? His smile faded. Because it was never my secret to tell. Lily's breath hitched. But you used it, didn't you? That's why you weren't worried about this trial. You knew everything would fall apart the second the truth came out. Martin tilted his head. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. Lily ignored the cold satisfaction in his voice. Margaret was hiding me. Why? What was she so afraid of? For the first time, Martin's smirk wavered. He exhaled slowly, rubbing his thumb against his chin. You really want the truth? Lily's chest tightened. That's all I want. Martin leaned forward. Then you'll have to make a deal. Lily's blood ran cold. What? His expression darkened. This trial isn't about justice, Lily. It never was. It's about control. And right now your mother Margaret is losing control. If you want the truth, you're going to have to help me. Lily swallowed hard. Help you how? Martin's voice dropped lower. Get me out of this. Lily's heart pounded. You want me to drop the charges? Martin smiled. Not drop them. Just weaken them. Enough for the court to doubt your testimony. Enough for me to walk away with minimal consequences. Lily's pulse raced. Why would I do that? Because, Martin said, if I go down, Margaret goes down with me. Lily's mouth went dry. What do you mean? She whispered. Martin sighed, as if debating whether to say it. Then he met her gaze, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes she hadn't noticed before. Pity. You think Margaret's the victim. In all this, he said quietly. But she's not. She's been lying to you for your entire life, and not just about your name. She's done worse things, Lily. Things the court hasn't even uncovered yet. Lily shook her head. No. She wouldn't what? Martin cut in. Wouldn't steal you? Wouldn't keep you hidden? Wouldn't let a dying woman spend her last years searching for her daughter? Lily's breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. You want the truth? Martin leaned closer. Ask yourself this. Why was Margaret the one raising you? Why did she fight so hard to keep you hidden? And most importantly, who was she hiding you from? Lily felt dizzy. Martin leaned back, his job done. Think about it. But don't take too long. He glanced toward the courtroom doors. Your real father is waiting. And if he finds out what Margaret did, you'll lose her forever. Lily's legs felt weak. She stumbled back toward the door, gripping the handle as she turned to look at him one last time. You're lying, she whispered. Martin smirked. Then prove it. Lily turned and walked out. And for the first time, she wasn't sure who she could trust anymore. Lily barely remembered walking out of the courtroom. Her mind was a whirlwind of Martin's words, twisting and turning, trying to fit into a reality she wasn't prepared to face. She's done worse things, Lily, things the court hasn't even uncovered yet. The hallway outside the courtroom felt suffocating. The walls seemed to press in as she forced herself to breathe. Margaret had been lying to her for years. But why? Lily. The voice was deep, unfamiliar, yet somehow She knew. She turned slowly. A man stood a few feet away, hands clasped in front of him. He was tall, with streaks of silver in his dark hair, a strong jawline, and piercing blue eyes, the same shade Lily saw in the mirror every morning. Michael Alden, her real father. Lily's breath caught. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times in the past 10 minutes, but now that he was standing in front of her, she felt frozen. Michael took a step closer, his face unreadable. I wasn't sure if I should come inside. Lily's fingers curled at her sides. Why didn't you? He hesitated. Because I wasn't sure if you'd want me there. A lump formed in Lily's throat. 17 years. He had been looking for her for 17 years, and now here he was, standing just a few feet away. Is it true? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Did you know about me? Michael's eyes darkened. I knew you existed. I just didn't know where you were. Lily swallowed. And my mother? Pain flickered across his face. Diana never gave up. She spent her last years searching for you. She would have given anything to hold you again. Lily's chest ached. Why did no one find me? She asked. How did Margaret keep me hidden? Michael's expression hardened. Because she had help. Lily stiffened. Help from who? Michael exhaled slowly. Margaret wasn't acting alone. There was someone else involved. Someone powerful enough to erase records, to change identities, to make sure you were never found. Lily's stomach twisted. Who? Michael looked her dead in the eyes. Your grandfather. Lily's breath caught. What? Michael's jaw clenched. Edward Alden. The name sent a chill down Lily's spine. Even though she had never met him, she knew who he was. A billionaire. A ruthless businessman. A man feared in corporate and political circles. Her grandfather. Lily shook her head. That doesn't make sense. Why would he want me gone? Michael's voice was tight. Because you were never supposed to exist. Lily's blood ran cold. Michael stepped closer. Edward Alden controlled everything. My marriage, my career, even my family. And when your mother got pregnant, he saw you as a threat. He didn't want an heir that he couldn't manipulate. So he made you disappear. Lily's hands shook. And Margaret? Where does she fit into this? Michael's expression darkened. Margaret was desperate. She was young, struggling, and Edward offered her something she couldn't refuse: money, protection, a way out of her old life. All she had to do was take you and make sure you never came back. Lily's head spun. Margaret had stolen her. Not out of love, not out of desperation, but because she had made a deal with her grandfather. And now that deal was about to come crashing down. Michael's voice dropped lower. Edward Alden doesn't make mistakes, Lily. If he finds out you're back, he won't let you go so easily. The words sent a chill through her. She thought this trial was about Martin, about justice. But now she realized the real fight was just beginning, and her own grandfather was at the center of it. Lily's world had already shattered once today, and now, as she stood in the hallway of the courthouse, facing the father she had never known, she realized there was still more to break. Her grandfather, Edward Alden, had orchestrated everything. The name alone carried weight. Edward Alden wasn't just some powerful businessman. He was a kingmaker, a man whose wealth and influence stretched far beyond what most people could comprehend. And he had erased her from existence. Lily swallowed hard. If Edward wanted me gone, why am I still here? Michael Alden's expression was grim. Because he thought you were dead. The word struck her like a hammer. What? Michael nodded. After you disappeared, I never stopped looking. But one day, the searches just stopped. Edward declared you dead. He had an official death certificate made. No one questioned it. Lily's stomach twisted. So to the world I never existed? Michael's jaw clenched. Not in any way that mattered. Lily's breath hitched. Margaret hadn't just taken her. She had buried her. A hand touched her shoulder. Jack Rowe. The investigator had been silent until now, watching the exchange unfold. "There's something you should know, Lily," Jack said carefully. "Edward Alden is already aware that you're alive." Lily's blood ran cold. Michael turned sharply. "How do you know that?" Jack sighed. "Because his lawyers filed a request this morning." Lily's heart pounded. "A request for what?" Jack hesitated. "To stop the court from legally recognizing your identity." Silence. Lily felt her body go numb. "He's trying to erase me again." Jack nodded grimly. "If the court doesn't formally recognize you as Lily Alden, you won't be able to reclaim your name, your birthright, or any inheritance. As far as the law is concerned, you'll remain Lily Donovan, an identity that Edward can control." Lily clenched her fists. "Why would he do this now?" Michael exhaled slowly. "Because you came back. Because now you're a liability." Lily's mind raced. All this time, she had been focused on Martin on the trial, but she had been looking at the wrong enemy. Edward Alden wasn't just trying to erase her identity. He was trying to erase her. Again. Lily turned to Jack. "Is there a way to stop him?" Jack hesitated. "Yes. But you won't like it." Lily forced herself to stand taller. "Tell me." Jack exchanged a glance with Michael before speaking. "The only way to stop Edward is to go public. If the court process takes too long, we need the media. We need the world to see that you're alive before Edward can make you disappear again." Lily's stomach twisted. The idea of exposing her life, of standing in front of cameras, of being a headline, it was terrifying. But so was the alternative. Michael spoke, his voice firm. "Lily, I know this is overwhelming. But if Edward succeeds, he won't stop at erasing your identity. He'll make sure you never have a life outside of his control." Lily swallowed hard. She had spent years fighting for her place in the world. She wasn't about to let someone take it from her again. Lifting her chin, she met Jack's gaze. "Call the reporters," she said. Jack nodded. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was war. The decision was made. Lily barely had time to process it before Jack Rowe was already making calls, setting everything in motion. The courthouse was no longer just a place of legal battles. It was about to become a battleground for something much bigger. Within an hour, reporters flooded the steps outside the courtroom, their cameras poised, microphones ready. The air was charged with anticipation. The trial had already gained media attention, but now it was national news. "Lily," Michael said beside her, voice low, "once you do this, there's no going back." Lily swallowed, her throat dry. "I know." She wasn't just reclaiming her name. She was declaring war against a man who had spent nearly 2 decades ensuring she didn't exist. Edward Alden was watching. Somewhere, in a towering office or a private estate, he was seeing his long-buried secret resurface in real time. And Lily wanted him to know she wasn't afraid. Jack turned to her. "Are you ready?" Lily nodded, even though she wasn't sure if anyone could ever truly be ready for something like this. The moment she stepped outside the courthouse, the reporters erupted. "Miss Donovan, Miss Alden, are you prepared for legal action against Edward Alden? What does this mean for the trial? Lily over here?" The questions bombarded her from all directions. But Lily didn't flinch. She stepped onto the courthouse steps, her heart hammering in her chest. Jack gestured for silence, and miraculously, the crowd settled. Lily took a breath. Then she spoke. "My name is Lily Alden," she said, her voice steady. "For 17 years I was hidden, lied to, taken from my real family. Today, that ends." The cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled furiously. She continued. "Edward Alden erased me from the world once. He will not do it again." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lily clenched her fists. "I will fight for my name. I will fight for my place. And I will not be silenced." A journalist raised a hand. "Miss Alden, are you saying your grandfather is responsible for your disappearance?" Lily met the journalist's gaze. "I'm saying he's tried to control my life from the shadows. and I'm stepping into the light." A wave of excitement rolled through the reporters. Jack placed a firm hand on her shoulder, signaling it was time to leave. Lily nodded, stepping back toward the courthouse doors. But just as she reached them, her phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. That was a mistake. Lily's blood ran cold. She turned the screen toward Jack. His expression darkened. Michael leaned in, reading it over her shoulder. "It's him." Lily gritted her teeth. "Let him watch." She stepped inside the courtroom, the doors closing behind her. Let Edward Alden see. She wasn't running. She was fighting. The doors of the courtroom shut behind Lily, muffling the chaos of reporters outside. But inside, the air was just as tense. The trial wasn't over, and now, the battle for her identity had ignited something even bigger. Jack Rowe and Michael Alden flanked her as she walked toward the prosecution table. Margaret was already there, her face pale, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She didn't look at Lily. Lily wasn't sure if she wanted her to. "Are you all right?" Eleanor Carter, the prosecutor, asked in a low voice. Lily nodded. "I will be." Eleanor glanced at the phone still clutched in Lily's hand. "Alden?" Lily tightened her grip. "He's watching." Eleanor's jaw clenched. "Then, let's make sure he sees this." The bailiff called for silence, and the judge re-entered. The court was back in session. "Before we proceed," the judge said, "it has come to my attention that new legal matters regarding the plaintiff's identity have been introduced to the public. However, today's trial remains focused on the allegations against Mr. Martin Graves. We will now move forward with the final testimonies." Lily took a slow breath. This wasn't over yet. She turned toward Martin Graves, who sat with an infuriatingly calm expression. If he was worried about the trial, he didn't show it. "Lily Alden, please return to the stand." She stood and walked forward. As she sat, her pulse pounded, but she forced herself to stay steady. Eleanor approached. "Lily, earlier today, Mr. Graves implied that your mother, Margaret Donovan, was involved in deeper deception. Now that we know you are not her biological daughter, do you believe she acted alone in keeping you hidden?" Lily hesitated. The answer should have been easy. She should have said yes. But now she wasn't so sure. Margaret had lied to her for years. She had stolen her away, raised her under a different name. But had she really orchestrated all of this alone? Or had Edward Alden been pulling the strings the entire time? "I don't know," Lily admitted. "But I don't think so." Margaret stiffened in her seat. Eleanor nodded. "Let's talk about Martin Graves. You originally accused him of violence against you, but we now know that on the night of your injury no one was in the room with you. Do you still believe he is guilty?" Lily's stomach churned. For the first time, she asked herself a question she had been avoiding. Had she been wrong? She had no doubt Martin was a terrible man. Manipulative. Dangerous. A liar. But had he actually hurt her that night? "I don't remember everything," Lily said slowly. "But I know Martin was involved in something bigger than just me. He may not have attacked me that night, but that doesn't mean he's innocent." Martin chuckled softly from the defense table. "How convenient." Lily shot him a glare. "You knew about me. You knew who I really was before I did. And you used it to your advantage." Martin leaned forward. "And yet I'm still here, aren't I?" The judge raised a hand. "Enough. The court will proceed with final arguments." Eleanor turned to the jury. "We have seen deception, manipulation, and hidden agendas at play in this case. While the circumstances have changed, one thing remains clear: Martin Graves is a man who thrives on control. He may not have struck Lily Alden that night, but he used her. He used her mother. And he knew exactly what was happening. I urge you to consider the full picture." The jury listened intently. Martin's attorney stood next. "Ladies and gentlemen, my client has been accused of many things, but the evidence speaks for itself. No physical harm was inflicted. The prosecution's case is built on speculation. Martin Graves may be guilty of secrets, but secrets are not a crime. Lily's fists clenched. The judge sighed. The jury will now deliberate. The courtroom fell into a tense silence. Lily turned toward Margaret, who had yet to say a word. "Was it true?" she whispered. Margaret looked at her, eyes full of regret. "I loved you, Lily. I always did." "But was it true?" Margaret swallowed hard. "Edward Alden gave me a choice. Take you and keep you hidden, or let you disappear for real." Lily's breath caught. "He would have had you killed," Margaret whispered. "I couldn't let that happen." Tears burned at the edges of Lily's eyes. The jury returned. The room stilled as the foreman stood. In the matter of Martin Graves, we find the defendant guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud. A murmur spread through the courtroom. Martin exhaled sharply. "So much for a clean exit." The judge nodded. "Martin Graves, you are sentenced to 10 years in federal prison." Lily barely heard the rest. It was over. Martin was going to prison, but her fight was just beginning. Edward Alden wouldn't stop. And now, she had to decide, would she fight for the family she never knew? Or would she disappear once again? Lily stood, feeling the weight of her decision. Then she turned to Jack. "Find me everything on Edward Alden." Jack nodded. She wasn't running anymore. This was just the beginning. Lily's story may have reached a verdict, but the battle for the truth is far from over. What would you do if you discovered your entire life was a lie? Would you fight for justice, or would you walk away? Let us know in the comments, and tell us where in the world you're watching from. If you loved this story and want more thrilling courtroom dramas, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a twist. See you in the next one. Where are you watching from? Comment below.